She heard him introduce another woman to the board she owned. Her name was not on the program. Her signature was on every wall. She had been invisible for 8 years by choice. That choice was almost done. The Hargrove Grand's 21st floor ballroom smelled like white lilies and old money. Round tables in ivory linen, tall candles catching the reflections of the Atlanta skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. A 4-piece jazz band played something soft and forgettable in the far corner. 200 guests moved through the space in tuxedos and floor-length black, holding champagne flutes they barely touched. The real currency in this room was eye contact and proximity. It was the Chambers Family Foundation annual gala. Marcus Chambers had organized it, Marcus Chambers had named it, and Marcus Chambers stood near the entrance in a charcoal suit that fit like a promise. He greeted people with the particular warmth of a man who understood that warmth, deployed correctly, is a form of control. Ada sat at table 12. Table 12 was near the kitchen doors. It was the last table before the wall. The centerpiece was smaller than the others, one candle instead of 3. And when the waitstaff brought out the dinner service, they placed a single set of silverware at Ada's seat and nothing else. No printed menu card. No place card with her name. When she asked the server about it, he looked at his clipboard and said, apologetically, that there appeared to have been an error in the seating system. She told him not to worry about it. She was wearing a simple navy dress. No jewelry except a pair of small gold studs her mother had given her years ago. Her hair was pulled back, clean and practical. On the table in front of her sat a leather portfolio, slim and dark brown, the initials A.O. pressed in the lower right corner. She kept her hands folded over it and watched the room with the particular attention of someone who has learned that watching is more useful than being watched. Across the ballroom, Marcus moved like weather, confident, warm, filling every space he entered. On his left arm was Cressida Nolan, and Cressida Nolan was wearing a gold dress and a necklace that caught the light every time she turned her head. The necklace was thin and elegant, a flat serpentine chain with a small circular pendant. Ada had seen that necklace before. Marcus had come home from a trip to Houston the previous month and said he had picked up something for a client's wife. He had said it with the easy confidence of a man who did not expect to be questioned. Ada had not questioned him. Vivienne Chambers, Marcus's mother, moved through the crowd like someone who had practiced this specific walk in a mirror. She wore a deep burgundy gown and diamonds at her throat and paused every few steps to press cheeks with people she half knew and fully needed. Her daughter Portia trailed behind her, younger and quieter, scrolling through her phone between handshakes. They reached Ada's table at 7:20, just before the program began. Vivienne did not sit down. She stood at the edge of the table and looked at Ada the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they are deciding whether to move. You actually came, Vivienne said. Not a question, something harder. Portia did not look up from her phone. She made a small sound, low and amused, that was not quite a laugh. Vivienne set her champagne on the table, right next to Ada's portfolio, not quite touching it. Marcus tells me the foundation's operations are really finding their footing this year. He's worked so hard. She paused. It means a lot to the family, to see him finally stepping into something worthy of him. Ada looked at her. She did not say, I have funded this foundation from my personal accounts for 6 years. She did not say, the speech Vivienne was about to give had been drafted by Ada's communications director. She did not say anything at all. I imagine events like this must feel a little overwhelming, Vivienne continued. All these people, all this energy. Some people just aren't built for rooms like this. She picked up her champagne. Marcus understands that. He's very patient with it. Portia finally looked up. She glanced at Ada once, quickly, then back down. Vivienne moved away. Her heels clicked on the marble as she walked toward the stage to take her seat on the dais. Damon Chambers arrived at table 12 at 7:35, just as the room was being asked to find their seats. He was Marcus's older brother, tall and neat, wearing an expression of practiced reasonableness. He placed a white envelope on the table in front of Ada without sitting down. From the family, he said quietly. Just something to review when you have a moment. a conversation they'd like to have before things get more complicated. Ada looked at the envelope. She picked it up. She turned it over once in her hands, feeling the weight of whatever was inside, the particular weight of people who believe their money is a solution to every problem they have created. Then she placed it back in Damon's hand. She did not open it. She did not explain herself. She set it back into his palm and returned her hands to her portfolio. Damon looked at the envelope. He looked at her. He nodded once, slowly, as if he had expected this and was only mildly inconvenienced by it, and walked away. The lights dimmed for the program. Marcus took the podium at 8:10 to a sustained, genuine round of applause. He had that quality, the ability to make a room feel like it had been waiting for him. He thanked the sponsors. He thanked the staff. He thanked his family. And he looked toward the dais where Vivian sat, and she pressed her hand to her heart. He did not look toward table 12. Then he crossed the stage to where Cressida was, standing near the side, and he said her name into the microphone. He said she represented the future of everything they were building. He said she had a vision and a drive and an instinct for what this work required. He said he was proud to have her at his side. He pulled a chair out for her at the head table. She sat down. The room applauded again. The necklace caught the light, and Vivian smiled the smile of a woman who has arranged everything exactly as she intended. Ada did not clap. She did not move. Her hands rested on the portfolio, and she watched Marcus the way you watch something you have already finished deciding about. The dinner plates arrived. Table 12 received one. It sat in front of her, full and untouched, surrounded by 3 empty place settings that had never been meant for anyone. She ate the meal. It was good. She finished it slowly. When the server came to collect the plate, she thanked him by name. She had been listening when he introduced himself at the start of the evening. He noticed. It made him stand a little straighter as he walked away. At 9:15, Marcus passed table 12 on his way to greet a group near the windows. He did not stop. He did not look at her. As he passed, he bent slightly at the waist, close enough that only she could hear. He said 3 words in the particular voice of a man who has decided he no longer needs to be careful. "This is over." That was all. Ada sat for a moment after he walked away. The jazz band had shifted to something with more tempo. The room's noise rose around her, glasses and laughter and the ambient confidence of people who believed the night was going exactly as planned. She picked up her portfolio from the table. She stood. She walked toward the hallway at the back of the room, calm and unhurried, the way her grandfather had taught her to move when something important was happening, when stillness was not weakness, but precision. In the women's restroom, she stood at the mirror for a moment. The light was steady. The room was empty. She reached into the small inner pocket of her portfolio and touched the brass compass, her thumb finding the familiar edge of the engraved pattern without needing to look. She did not take it out. She looked at herself in the mirror for exactly as long as she needed to. Then she took out her phone and typed a single message to Sylvia Osei. "Savannah, confirm the date." The reply came in 11 seconds. "Already confirmed. We are ready." Ada put the phone away. She smoothed the front of her navy dress. She walked back out into the ballroom and returned to table 12. She sat down. She stayed until the end of the evening, polite and quiet, the way a woman sits when she knows something no one else in the room knows yet. Ada Okonkwo grew up in Durham, North Carolina, in a house with thin walls and a backyard that needed mowing more often than anyone had time for. Her father died of a heart attack when she was 7. She remembered his shoes by the front door more clearly than she remembered his face, which she understood later was what grief does to children. It keeps the small things and loses the rest. Her mother, Ngozi, worked nights at Duke University Hospital and days in the half-alert state of someone who cannot afford exhaustion. She kept the lights on. She showed up. But the person who shaped Ada, the one whose mind Ada carried into every room she ever entered, was her grandfather. Nyameka Okonkwo lived 2 blocks away in a small brick house he had bought in 1979. He arrived in Durham from Anambra State the year before with $43 and a mechanical engineering degree and no particular interest in being told what was possible. He had worked for the County Water Authority for 26 years and retired at 62. He spent the following decade doing exactly what he had always wanted to do, reading, growing things, and paying careful attention to the world. His backyard had cachua and dofung planted in neat rows. His kitchen smelled like groundnut soup and old newsprint. His shelves held books on economic geography, regional infrastructure, and the history of land ownership in the American South. As a child, Ada had found those subjects impossibly dry. She understood now they were the most practical education she could have received. Every Saturday morning, Ada would walk the 2 blocks and let herself in through the side gate. Her grandfather would already be at the kitchen table. He would have spread a regional map across the surface, the kind you could buy at gas stations for $3, and he would be tracing lines with a pencil, not roads that already existed, roads that did not yet. He never explained what he was doing in the way a teacher explains. He just did it, and he let Ada sit beside him and watch. Occasionally he would point at a stretch of empty land or an unmarked curve of river and say, "People live there. They need a way in and a way out. Whoever builds that first owns the relationship." Then he would go back to his pencil and not say anything else for 20 minutes. Ada watched him do this for years before she understood what she was learning. He also kept every contract he had ever signed in a manila folder in the second drawer of his filing cabinet, not for legal reasons. He kept them because he believed that the only person who truly understood an agreement was the person who had read it twice before signing and once after. He reviewed them periodically the way other men reviewed sports scores. Ada had found this strange as a child. She found it invaluable as an adult. He never told her to be careful with men. He never told her to protect herself. He just showed her, by example and repetition, that the difference between building something that lasts and building something that collapses is almost always in the paperwork. Ada was 27 years old and sitting beside his hospital bed at Duke when he placed the brass compass in her hands. It was a Thursday afternoon in October. The room had the particular afternoon light of hospital rooms, flat and yellowish. Not warm enough to be comforting. He had been declining for 6 weeks, his lungs giving out with the slow patience of old machinery. Ada had been driving up from Charlotte on weekends and calling on Tuesdays and Thursdays, trying not to think too clearly about the arithmetic of time. That afternoon they had not been talking much. He was watching a segment on the news about a new highway project in Georgia, public-private partnership, large numbers, a lot of politicians in hard hats. Ada had been sitting in the chair beside him with her laptop open, working on a funding model for a project she was not ready to name out loud yet. She said, without looking up from her screen, "Granddad, I've been thinking about starting a fund, infrastructure-focused, private capital." He did not respond immediately. She looked up. He was already reaching into the pocket of his hospital gown, slowly, with both hands, the way he did everything now, with the careful deliberateness of someone rationing effort. He pulled out the brass compass. She had seen it her entire life. It was small, no wider than a 50-cent piece, the face engraved with Igbo geometric patterns that she used to trace with her finger as a small child sitting at his kitchen table. He held it out to her with both hands, slightly trembling, and she took it the same way, with both hands. He said, "The compass does not argue with the storm. It simply knows where north is." She sat with that for a moment. He turned back to the television. The politician in the hard hat was cutting a ribbon. Her grandfather died 11 days later, early on a Sunday morning, before Ada could get to the hospital. She sat in her car in the parking garage for 40 minutes before she could drive. Then she drove back to Charlotte, went into her office, and worked for 6 hours. Not because she did not grieve, because her grandfather had taught her, without ever saying so explicitly, that the work and the grief are not opposites. They are the same motion. She had started Okafor Infrastructure Partners the previous year, at 26. The name came deliberately from his side of the family, from the Okonkwo name she had never been encouraged to lead with in professional spaces. Her mother's father's name, the name of the man with the maps. She began with 3 investors, a retired civil engineer who trusted her analysis, a pension fund administrator who had reviewed her model and found nothing to disagree with, a family office in Atlanta searching for exactly the structure she was offering, $12 million in initial committed capital, a clear mandate. Invest in infrastructure assets in underserved markets in the southeastern United States and West Africa, particularly water, roads, and port logistics. Long holding periods. Patient capital. The kind of investment that does not make headlines for 5 years and then cannot be ignored. The legal structure was Sylvia's work. They had been friends since Howard University, where Sylvia had studied law and Ada finance, and they had spent 4 years arguing productively about capital and civic life. Sylvia built it carefully. Okafor Infrastructure Partners LLC, with 100% voting control held by Ada through a trust named after Ada's maternal grandmother, Adaora Okonkwo. A series of subsidiary operating entities handled day-to-day relationships. The operating entities had names, letterhead, and employees who referred to the fund by those names. Marcus had never asked which entity was which. She had met Marcus in Washington, D.C. in March of 2016 at an infrastructure investment conference. He was one of the afternoon speakers, talking about the future of urban mobility. He was good at it the way certain people are good at speaking, fluent and confident, with the quality of someone who has learned to sound like he knows more than he does. Ada sat in the front row and noted, specifically, 3 moments where his confidence exceeded his data. She also noted that he was funny, and that funny is harder to fake than knowledge. He found her at the networking reception afterward and said, "You were the one in the front row who wasn't writing anything down." She told him she was writing in her head. He asked what she had written. She told him 2 of the 3 data errors she had caught. He laughed, not defensively, which she respected. They had dinner 3 days later. They dated for 14 months. They got married in a small ceremony in Durham with her mother and 43 people who mattered to them. She did not tell him about the fund, not because she was hiding it from him, exactly. She had thought carefully about the distinction between the money and the relationship, and she had watched what happened when people confused the two. The money does not corrupt the love, necessarily, but it changes the architecture. It changes what people are asking for when they say they want something from you. Her grandfather had never been able to explain to Ada's father what he actually owned because Ada's father had never asked. He had assumed his way into a picture that was not accurate, and when he died young there had been confusion and a brief unpleasantness about the property that had taken 2 years to resolve. Ada had watched her mother navigate that unpleasantness and had filed it away as a lesson about what happens when assumptions go uncorrected. She gave Marcus a title, Director of External Relations, for one of the subsidiary operating entities. She gave him a salary that was generous and a role that was real. He managed donor relationships for the foundation they had established together, attended industry events, represented the fund's community-facing work at conferences. He was good at it. He was genuinely good with people, and Ada had never been under any illusion that charm was not a form of skill. He signed his employment contract without reading it carefully. She knew this because she had watched him sign it, and she had seen his eyes move across the pages at the speed of someone looking for the signature line, not the clauses. She had noted it. She had said nothing. For 3 years, things were functional, if not warm. Marcus had begun to refer to the fund as our company in social settings. Ada did not correct him, partly because she understood what he was reaching for, and partly because the reaching itself told her something she needed to know. He had begun to describe his professional history, at dinner parties and in casual conversations, in a way that placed him earlier and more centrally in the fund's formation than was accurate. She watched people receive this narrative and nod. She watched it calcify, over months and years, into a story that Marcus believed and that others repeated. Vivienne had moved into the house on Peachtree Hills 18 months into the marriage, came for a month, and stayed indefinitely. She brought opinions the way some people bring luggage, in large quantities, with no apparent plan to take them home. She had opinions about Ada's hair and Ada's clothes and Ada's manner at dinners and Ada's particular combination of professional confidence and personal quiet. which Vivian read consistently as a kind of deficiency. Ada listened to these opinions and did not respond to them, which Vivian read as confirmation that Ada had no response, which was not what was happening. What was happening was that Ada had learned, early and thoroughly, that you do not spend your energy on arguments you have already won. The paperwork was right. The structure was right. The trust documents were filed and recorded and certified. Whatever story was being told in this house, or at this table, or in this ballroom, it was a story about appearances. Ada had no quarrel with appearances. She had the underlying facts, and the underlying facts were very patient. Cressida Nolan joined Marcus's team 8 months before the gala. She had been working for a competing real estate development group and came with a strong professional reputation. She carried the particular energy of someone who has decided they are building towards something without fully considering what they might be building on. She was sharp. Ada could see that. She was also ambitious in the specific way that makes people take shortcuts they convince themselves are not shortcuts. Marcus talked about Cressida the way men sometimes talk about professional admiration when it is something else. A specific frequency, a specific emphasis, a careful avoidance of the wrong words that itself became the signal. Ada began documenting in February. She called Sylvia in March. She told Sylvia, "Review the whole structure, check every clause. I want to know that everything is exactly where I put it." Sylvia said, "I already know it is." Ada said, "Check it again." Sylvia checked it again. Everything was where Ada had put it. The morning Ada knew was an ordinary Tuesday. She made 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of Marcus. He did not look up. He was on his phone, scrolling. No particular urgency to it. He did not say thank you. She stood there a moment and realized she was not waiting for him to say it. She had stopped waiting for that some time ago. She picked up her own coffee and went to the window. She looked at the back garden, which needed work. She thought about the maps on her grandfather's kitchen table, all those penciled lines toward places that needed something, and she thought, north. She knew where north was. She texted Sylvia that afternoon. "We should talk about timing." They met the following Thursday. Ada said, "I want to close the Savannah deal before anything else changes, and I want the annual investor conference scheduled for the same week as the foundation gala." Sylvia said, "That's very specific." Ada said, "Yes." She said nothing else about it. For the next 3 months, she moved through her own life like someone who has already made the decision and is simply waiting for the appropriate moment to implement it. She went to Vivian's dinners. She sat through Marcus's speeches. She attended Damon's birthday party. He pulled her aside and suggested she was a practical woman who would know when to step back gracefully. She thanked him for the observation and went back to her table. She sat through the gala. She ate dinner alone. 1 plate, at a table no one else had been seated at, by an organization she had funded for 6 years, at an event named after a family she had married into. Her husband introduced another woman to the room with a warmth he had not shown Ada in longer than she could usefully remember. She heard his 3 words in the corridor of that ballroom and felt, not pain exactly, but something more final than pain. She texted Sylvia 1 word from the bathroom. "Ready." The Okafor Infrastructure Partners annual investor conference was held on the 3rd Thursday of October at the Savannah Convention Center. It fell the same week as the Chamber's Foundation Gala. Ada had arranged it that way. 350 attendees, state pension funds, regional development banks, Port Authority representatives from Georgia and South Carolina, 2 delegations from West African government infrastructure agencies. The fund's senior staff called her Miss Okonkwo Chambers in professional settings. They had never made the mistake of assuming anything about who owned what. Marcus arrived at 10:15 in a gray suit with Cressida beside him, carrying a leather folio stamped with the subsidiary company's letterhead. He had been to these conferences before, in his capacity as Director of External Relations. He moved through the lobby the way he moved through all rooms, with the confident ease of a man who has decided in advance that he belongs there. He had also invited Vivian, Damon, and Portia, who had driven from Atlanta the evening before. Marcus had told them there would be a significant announcement. He had been vague about the details in the way of someone who wants to create anticipation. "You should be there," he had said. "You will want to see it." They arrived together at 10:20, a compact formation of people who believed they were witnessing something. Ada arrived through the building's side entrance at 10:30. She was wearing a black suit, cut precisely to her measurements, that she had collected from the tailor 6 days before. The jacket was structured at the shoulders and tapered at the waist. It had an inside chest pocket on the left side. She had placed the brass compass there before she left the hotel that morning, pressing it flat against her sternum with one hand while she buttoned the jacket with the other. Her hair was down, in loose waves that her stylist had shaped 2 days prior. Small gold earrings, the same ones from the gala. No other jewelry. She walked into the main hall at a pace that was not hurried and was not slow. She did not look toward the table where Marcus was seated with Cressida and his family. She walked directly to the stage-side corridor where Sylvia was waiting. Sylvia looked at her. Ada looked at Sylvia. Sylvia said, "The packets are already at every seat." Ada said, "Good." She stood in the corridor for 4 minutes, listening to the room settle. 350 people found their chairs, and the ambient noise dropped as the program time approached. She reached into her inside pocket and held the compass in her closed hand for a moment. She was not thinking about Marcus. She was thinking about a Saturday morning in Durham, maps spread across a kitchen table, a pencil moving across roads that did not yet exist. The compass does not argue with the storm. She put it back. Sylvia walked out first, took the podium, and opened the conference with the standard welcome. She acknowledged the returning partners. She thanked the new institutional attendees. Then she said, in a tone that was professional and even, "Before we move into the substantive program, I want to take a few minutes to address something about the fund's ownership and governance structure. There has been some confusion in certain internal communications about these matters, and it's important that everyone in this room has an accurate picture before we proceed." The room shifted, not dramatically. The particular quiet shift of people who were listening differently now. Every seat had a packet, dark blue cover, the Okafor Infrastructure Partners logo at the top, the fund's name in full. Inside, a 2-page summary of the ownership structure with a simplified diagram. The trust documents, certified and recorded. The articles of organization. A letter from the Georgia Secretary of State's office confirming the fund's registered owner of record. All clean, all precise, all dated correctly, all bearing one name. Ada came through the side door as Sylvia finished speaking. She walked toward the stage at the same measured pace. She did not look at the audience. She looked at the stage. She took the 3 steps up to the platform, crossed to the podium, and stood there for a moment, looking out at the room. Marcus was 4 tables back on the left. She could see him without looking directly at him, the way you can always locate the thing in a room that you have been tracking for years. His face had gone still. He was holding the blue packet in both hands, his thumbs at the edges, and he was looking at the page with the ownership diagram. She did not look at him. She looked at the people she had worked with for years. The pension fund director from Georgia was a woman named Margaret Ellison. She had been Ada's first institutional investor. She reviewed every annual report with the careful attention of someone who took her fiduciary duty personally. The Port Authority delegation from Savannah, the development bank representatives who had flown in from Lagos and Accra. She adjusted the microphone slightly. She said, "Okafor Infrastructure Partners was founded in 2013. I am the founder. I am the sole owner. I am the person who signed every investment agreement, every partnership contract, and every document you are holding right now. Some people in this room received different information about that. I am sorry that the confusion was allowed to persist as long as it did. It ends today." She paused, not for effect exactly, because the next sentence needed its own space. "I named this fund Okafor, not for a husband, not for a brand, for my grandfather, Nnaemeka Okonkwo, who taught me to read maps before I could drive to the places on them. and for the work he believed was worth doing, which is exactly the work this fund does. She looked down at her notes for a single moment. The packets in front of you contain the complete and accurate ownership documentation. If you have questions about the legal structure, Miss Osei will address them after the first panel. If you have questions about the fund's strategy and portfolio, I'll take those now. That is what we are here to discuss. She looked up. Thank you for making the trip to Savannah. Silence. The particular quality of a room that has just recalibrated. Margaret Ellison, 4 rows back, opened the blue packet to the first page. She placed her reading glasses on her face, adjusted them, and began reading carefully, methodically, the way she had read every document Ada had ever sent her. She did not clap. She simply read, which was, Ada had always thought, the most serious form of respect that room was capable of offering. Then, from the back of the conference hall, one of the junior associates from the Lagos delegation began to clap, slowly, steadily, not a performance but a statement. Others followed. The Savannah Port Authority team, 2 of the development bank directors, the senior analyst from the Charlotte office who had worked under Ada for 4 years and who had never, to his knowledge, worked for anyone but Ada. Some people sat still. Some looked at their packets. A few, near the left side of the room, were watching Marcus. Sylvia had already moved to the side of the stage where she stood with 2 members of the fund's legal team. They were waiting. Marcus stood up. The chair caught on the carpet as he pushed back too quickly and fell sideways with a flat, definitive sound that traveled further than it should have in that room. No one moved to right it. Marcus looked at it for a half second, then looked at Sylvia, then looked at Ada. His mouth opened. Ada was already looking at the next page of her notes. Sylvia stepped forward, smoothly, before Marcus could speak. She said, in a voice that was not unkind, but was very clear, "Mr. Chambers, I'll need about 20 minutes of your time after the opening panel. The documentation for the employment contract termination is prepared. The conference room on the left is ready. I can also send the documentation to your personal counsel," Marcus said. Sylvia said, "Your company credit accounts have already been suspended as of this morning. The fund vehicle is not available to you after today. I'll walk you through everything in the side room." She said it the way lawyers say things when they are not arguing, stating a record, making clear that the record exists. Cressida had already pushed her chair back from the table. She did not look at Marcus. She picked up her bag, the organized, deliberate motion of someone who has just understood the full geometry of a situation and is extracting herself from it. She walked toward the back of the room without hurrying. Her heels were quiet on the carpet. The door at the back of the hall opened and closed. Marcus watched the door close. Vivienne had not moved. She was sitting very straight in her chair with the blue packet closed in front of her on the table, her hands flat on either side of it. Her expression had the particular quality of someone who has been running a very long game and has just discovered that the board was not the one she thought she was playing on. Sylvia's assistant, a young woman named Kezia, who had prepared the conference materials for 3 weeks, moved through the room and delivered a separate, smaller envelope to Vivian's table. Inside was the formal notice regarding the Peachtree Hills property. 30 days. Respectfully worded, legally unambiguous. Damon had stood up and was now near the side aisle, holding his jacket by the collar in one hand, looking at nothing in particular. He had the expression of a man recalculating a great many things at once. Portia remained seated, her phone face down on the table, her hands in her lap. Ada looked out at the room. The applause had settled. The attendees with packets were reading them. The attendees without questions were waiting for the program to resume. The room had the energy of a space that had just been reorganized around a clearer set of facts, which is a different energy from disruption. It was not chaos. It was correction, she said. The first panel begins in 10 minutes. Today's agenda covers 2 portfolio reviews and an update on the Volta Region Water Project, which I'll present myself after lunch. I'll see you in the hall. She stepped back from the podium. She did not walk out immediately. She stood to the side of the stage while the room moved around the new facts. People rose and spoke. The Savannah delegates consulted their packets. Margaret Ellison read the first page and moved to the second with the care of someone who trusts what she is reading. Then she walked back through the side door, alone, into the quiet corridor. She stood there for a moment, the sound of the conference hall muffled behind the door. She did not feel triumphant. She had expected to feel something she could name as victory. What she felt instead was quieter and more permanent. It was the steadiness of a woman who has stopped keeping a secret because she decided the secret had served its purpose. Its time was done. She walked toward the conference room on the left, where Sylvia was waiting with the termination paperwork. There was still a great deal of work to do. Ada Okonkwo Chambers had never in her life walked away from work that needed doing. 7 months later, the Okafor Infrastructure Partners office occupied the 14th floor of a building in Savannah's historic district, 4 blocks from the river. The east-facing windows caught the morning light off the water and held it in long yellow bands across the floors. The office had moved from Atlanta 6 weeks after the conference. Ada had made that decision for practical reasons, which also happened to remove her from the city where the previous decade of her life had taken place. It was a Tuesday morning in early May, before 7, before the staff arrived, before the phones. Ada sat at her desk with a cup of coffee and a contract. The contract was 42 pages, the formalized agreement for the Volta Region Water Infrastructure Project, Phase 1, pipeline, installation, and distribution network for 3 provinces in the Volta region of Ghana. $200 million in committed capital, matching grant funding from a development finance institution, and a 20-year operating agreement with the regional government authority. Ada had been working toward this deal for 9 months. She had run the analysis herself and traveled to the region twice. She had met with the authority's engineers, the community representatives, and the regional environmental office. She had sat in a meeting room in Accra with Sylvia on her left and gone through the contract page by page until there was nothing she did not understand. She was on the signature page now. The morning light settled across her desk, across the map she had tacked to the left side of the surface. It was a regional map of the Volta Basin with pencil marks on it. The same gesture, the same language she had learned at a kitchen table 40 years behind her. She had bought the pencils first, before the map. She had not planned to. She had been in an office supply store buying printer paper. She stood in front of the pencil display for a long moment and understood that she was going to need them. She picked up her pen. From the small chair in the corner of the office came a sound, the quiet scrape of a pencil on paper. Ada's niece, Nkechi, was 8 years old and had her father's serious eyes and her great-grandfather's habit of working in complete silence. Her father, Ada's younger brother Emeka, worked overnight shifts at a distribution center. He occasionally needed Ada to take Nkechi for early morning hours. Ada did it without complaint, and with some private pleasure she had not fully admitted to herself. Nkechi had been given a stack of blank paper and a set of colored pencils. She established herself in the corner chair at 6:45 with the efficiency of a child who is used to finding her own occupation. "Diada," Nkechi said, without looking up from her paper. Where does this road go?" She held up the paper. She had drawn, with a blue pencil, a winding line across the page. A river, maybe, or a road. Around it were careful marks that might have been houses or trees. Ada looked at it. "Where do you want it to go?" Ada said. Nkechi thought about this for a moment, with the visible seriousness of someone consulting a real set of data. "To where the water is," she said. Ada held the pen over the signature line of the Volta contract. The morning light was steady on the page. From the river 4 blocks away came the low sound of a container ship moving out toward open water. It was a slow and enormous thing proceeding through its own channel with the unconcerned momentum of something that knows its path. She thought about Nkechi's map and where the road would go. She thought about her grandfather's hands, the slight tremor in them, the brass weight settling into her palm. She thought about a hospital room and afternoon light, and a man who had already said everything he needed to say. She signed the contract. She set the pen down. She reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and touched the brass compass with 2 fingers. The way you touch something not to take it out, but simply to confirm that it is still there, that you are still in relation to it. The bearing had not changed. It had not changed. It would not change. She picked up the Volta contract and set it in the outgoing folder on the right side of her desk. She picked up the next document in the stack. She drank her coffee. In the corner, Nkechi kept drawing. Marcus was working in Charlotte, in middle management at a logistics company, the same position he had held the year Ada met him. 3 conference invitations had been withdrawn after Savannah. A board appointment did not materialize. His professional network, built on proximity to Ada's fund and his confident claim of co-ownership, turned out to be a structure with a faulty, load-bearing wall. When the wall came down, the structure did not hold. Vivienne had moved to Decatur to live with Damon. She no longer attended the kinds of events she had previously attended because the invitations had stopped arriving. The people who had extended those invitations had, it turned out, been extending them largely because of the fund's institutional reputation, which they now understood had nothing to do with Vivienne or her son. Cressida Nolan had left Atlanta in November. No one in Ada's orbit had heard from her since. Damon was managing a restaurant in Inman Park. Portia had enrolled at Georgia State. Ada bore neither of them particular ill will. They had participated in something they had not designed, and what they received was proportionate to what they had done. The divorce had been straightforward in the way that divorces are straightforward when the legal paperwork has been correct from the beginning. Ada had kept the house, which was hers. She had kept her name, which she had always kept. She had kept everything she had built, which had always been hers. Marcus had received what his employment contract entitled him to receive, severance per its terms, and a reference letter that was accurate and neutral. He had also received the education of discovering at 41 that the things you believed were yours were never yours at all. Ada did not know if he had learned anything from that. She found she no longer needed to know. She had thought about removing Chambers from her name. In the end, she kept it, not for sentimental reasons, because it was the name on documents recorded in 12 states and 3 countries, the name she had carried through the most important work of her life. She saw no reason to revise that record. She was who she was. The record was what it was. Nkechi had gotten up from the corner chair and was now standing at the window, looking out at the river. "You can see the boats from here," she said. Ada turned in her chair. "Yes. Where are they going?" "Savannah Harbor first. Then the ocean." Nkechi considered this. "How do they know which way to go?" Ada was quiet for a moment. She turned the question over in her mind. Her grandfather had done this too, not because he did not know the answer, but because he believed the quality of the answer was worth the extra moment. "They have instruments," Ada said. "Things that tell them where north is, even when it's foggy, even when the water is rough." Nkechi nodded slowly. "And then they just go that way?" "And then they just go that way." Nkechi went back to the corner chair and picked up her blue pencil. She added another line to her map, a road or a river heading in a direction she had decided on. Ada turned back to her desk. The stack of contracts was not small. The Volta project was phase 1 of 4. There were 3 other deals in due diligence and 2 development partnerships in early structuring. A capital raise planned for the fall would add, if it closed as projected, $18 billion to the fund's total assets under management. There was a great deal of work. There was always a great deal of work, and Ada had never experienced that as a burden. She thought about her grandfather one more time, not as a memory but as a presence, the way the people who form us become a kind of permanent weather we carry. She thought about him at his kitchen table with his pencils and his maps, drawing lines toward places that needed roads, and she thought, this is what he was teaching me, not just the fund, not just the structure, the understanding that the work is the thing. The work is north. When you know what the work is, you know where you are. You know where you are going. The storms, the loud and chaotic storms that other people build and live inside, they do not change that. They never did. He taught her that storms are loud. North is quiet. North is always there. If you know someone who built the foundation while others took the credit, drop one word below that describes what they deserve. Just one word.